Okay. Welcome everyone to our special citywide virtual New York City Racial Justice Commission public input session on foundational values. I know that's a mouthful, but we have to get all the details in. To connect with New Yorkers in as many ways as possible, we are hosting some of our public input sessions virtually, and this is one of them. I am Ana Bermudez. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. In my day-to-day role, I serve as the commissioner of the New York City Department of Probation, but I have also been appointed to serve on the Racial Justice Commission. So today I stand before you in that capacity. First, let's have our other commissioners present today introduce themselves. Please introduce yourselves and state your pronouns.
I'll begin. I'm Jennifer Jones Austin, and my pronouns are she and her.
I am Joanne Yu, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia Mata. I am the Executive Director of La Colmena based in Staten Island, New York, and my pronouns are she, hers, and ella.
Hi, I'm Fred Davey, and in my day job, I am a executive at the Union Theological Seminary in New York City. I chair the city's CCRB, and my pronouns are he, him.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christopher Coy. My pronouns are he and his.
Thank you, commissioners. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the history of the land in which we convene on tonight, collectively. Although we're not in person, most of us tuning in are sitting on the land of Native people indigenous to this country and the traditional home of the Munsee, Lenape, and Wapinger peoples. Thank you all for attending today's session. Today will be a special session where we would like your input on what values and principles should guide our city. Tell us what you believe is at the core of the city and what makes us uniquely New York City. Before we begin, if anyone needs interpretation, please go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and locate the globe icon. Select the globe and the available language, which should be Spanish. So what is the Racial Justice Commission? The Racial Justice Commission is tasked with proposing changes to the city's charter that will uproot structural racism. We will lay the groundwork for a racially equitable city where race is not a determinant of economic, political, social, or psychological outcomes. New York City voters will be able to vote on the Commission's proposals as ballot measures in the November 2022 election. The Commission is composed of 11 members, and we are intentionally bringing together smaller groups of commissioners to host each public input session. What is the charter? The charter is the constitution, essentially, of New York City, the foundation of our government. The charter determines the roles and responsibilities of city agencies, the mayor, and other local elected officials. And what can the Commission change? The Commission is empowered to propose changes to the city charter, which must be approved by New York City voters. Through charter revision, the Commission can propose direct changes that will affect you, your families, neighborhoods, and communities, such as how city government spends money and makes decisions. It can change government in all aspects of life, including health, education, housing, economic opportunities, and policing, among others. It can create or change agencies or the powers of officials. If Henry didn't join us yet, Chris, go ahead.
Today, we will host this a little differently. I'm sorry, okay. The Commission values your expertise as an engaged resident of New York City. Every voice matters. You have firsthand experience on the ways in which city government impacts your day-to-day life, from sanitation to garbage pickup to housing security and housing affordability, zoning, parks, small businesses on your corridor, public safety, and so much more. Today, we are here to listen to you, to hear what you value, you feel should guide New York City government as fundamental principles, rights, goals, and ideas that describe the things that matter most to your community. We need your help in identifying the values and rights that will guide us in achieving racial justice. We need you to bring to the Commission's attention things the government should hold as guiding principles. For example, some may hold equity, inclusiveness, and quality education as values that should guide the action and decision-making of city government, while others might hold housing security and language accessibility as rights for all New Yorkers. Your collective input will help us identify patterns that points to the core of what we should be working towards as we form recommendations for charter revision. Your input help us to know what is important or most important and most valuable to everyday New Yorkers to live in a thriving, healthy, and safe life. Every testimony will be kept in city record, and the highlighted rights and value will quite literally shape what the Commission creates as ballot measures in the November 22 election. Today, we will host this a little differently than our in-person public hearings. We want to take the necessary steps to restore balance of power to the community. So we have incorporated restorative justice techniques into this session. All speakers will join us as panelists as you give your testimony. We acknowledge that many in this Zoom have been fighting for racial justice while enduring the very inequalities you are fighting against. We will start this session first with an acknowledgement of the harm racism has caused Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color. We will then review some group agreements to set the foundations for our sessions tonight, at which point we will start community testimony. If you are viewing on Zoom and would like to testify, please use the raise hand feature and Stan will message you to arrange your testimony. Viewing on YouTube, register to testify now with the bit.ly/values racial justice input. Each person will get 3 minutes to testify. We will notify you with a sound alert when your time is up. Please respect the time. Commissioners might ask follow-up questions of those testifying. You will not be timed, but please keep your responses brief. We will start by calling up the first 4 people to testify. Those 4 people will be brought on as panelists. The speakers will speak in the order in which they are called. If you're not speaking or finished testifying, please mute yourself. If you forget to do so, we will mute you. After all 4 people testify, we might have questions for some of you, so please stay on. After question and answer, we will call the next 4 persons to testify, at which point you will be moved back to the audience, and the next 4 will be brought in as panelists. This might take a couple of times to get, but our awesome, great support staff will guide you through this process, so please be patient with us. Lastly, please note, tonight we have mental health support staff that are trained to provide emotional support when necessary. If you are having a difficult time emotionally with anything said in this meeting, please feel free to email racialjustice@charter.nyc.gov, and we will connect you to our trained mental health respondents.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Yesenia Mata. I am one of the commissioners, and we are also here to acknowledge that what many of us already know, that racial inequities are baked into the very foundations of this city. And please excuse me for my for sometimes misspelling some of the pronunciations. It's just one of my accents, but please bear with me. Deep-seated and structural inequities continue to be reflected in almost every aspect of life, including health, education, public safety, and how our communities are resourced. Many of you in this room have borne the brunt of this reality for far too long. So through the Racial Justice Commission, we have an opportunity to start to address and reactify the harms of the past through structural structures to city government and how it functions to adequately and equitably serve all New Yorkers, no matter the race or zip code.
Thank you. And could I ask Commissioner Davey to read the group agreements?
I would love to, but I don't have them before me. So if someone else could read them, that would be great.
Commissioner Mata, would you continue then?
Absolutely. So as a fellow organizer myself, I understand that group agreements are very important to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, but as well that that the issue is well explained throughout the process. So I am going to be illustrating the group agreements, and all my fellow organizers that are here today understand the importance of this. So first, I would like to illustrate that the first group agreement is to respect ourselves for showing up and participating and doing the work of seeking racial justice. I know how hard it is for us to be here in this space. Number two, to have respect for the virtual space that we occupy here today. And that means to have respect for the chat function, which we all have access to. So please make sure that you keep an eye on that chat group, because there may be a question that you asked, somebody else already asked it. So please make sure that you keep up to date with that chat agreement. But also, please respect the right for everyone to speak. You know, one mic, we will mute ourselves when we are not prone to speak. Also, respect for each other's time. We will respect the 3-minute time limit. As we know, sometimes we know that what we have to say is very important, but we must respect the other organizers that are also here on this call. So please do understand that there's a 3-minute time limit, but also overall, there's love, honesty, and transparency. We are here to listen, and we know that you have a lot to say on the issues that affect our communities. And we are, as a fellow organizer myself, I really want to hear you all. So please make sure that we respect our time limit. So as I mentioned, the time limit is 3 minutes. So I will now leave it up to Commissioner Ana Bermudez.
Thank you, Yesenia. So now we will begin our community testimony. We will move the first 4 people to be panelists, and those people are Cecile De Laurentiis, Kristen Lofter, Julie Kim, and Jose Guevara. So you will come into Zoom in the order in which I read your names. And when you speak, please keep in mind that the interpreters need you to speak slowly and enunciate so that they can translate. As a reminder also, this is being live streamed to the public. If you prefer to submit written testimony, anybody who's on the Zoom call, please do so by visiting bit.ly/NYC-4-racial justice altogether. So bear with us for a second while we transfer people to panelists. I believe Cecile needs an assistance for rejoining as a panelist. Okay, we have. All right, so Cecile, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Cecile De Laurentiis. I'm here as a member of the Abolish the New York City, sorry, I'll slow down. The Abolish the New York City Tax Lien Sale Coalition, a coalition of 10 organizations from across New York City that has held workshops and roundtables about how to reform this tax lien sale, eventually mounting a campaign to abolish the lien sale entirely based on feedback from community members about the harm it has caused. The coalition has held press conferences and rallies in support of this campaign. The tax lien sale is a racial justice issue that affects both renters and homeowners of color. Small property owners often struggle to pay municipal bills, and tenants struggle with bad conditions and absentee landlords. For 25 years, the city has securitized the liens for property and utility bill debt and sold them to a trust made up of investors and hedge funds, relieving the city of its responsibilities to collect on the debt. The high interest and fees imposed by the trust worsen the financial situation of small property owners, disproportionately affecting those of color and sometimes forcing them to have their property foreclosed upon. For renters with absentee landlords, the liens on their building being sold to an investment trust does nothing to provide them safer, more secure, affordable housing. But rather, after the trust forecloses on properties, it sells them to the highest bidding developer or investor who will likely develop the property into unaffordable housing. I personally have worked with tax lien sale data from the city in the past while doing research on distressed local properties for mission-driven community land trusts that I've worked with that are trying to reclaim public land for public use. I'm currently on the steering committee for the Western Queens Community Land Trust, and in the past, I researched tax lien properties for the Bronx Community Land Trust during an internship. The vast majority of the properties whose liens are for sale are in low-income communities of color. Some are community-based nonprofits, etc. I spoke on the phone to some property owners whose debt was in the lien sale. Often, property owners do not even know their debt is in the lien sale. This does absolutely nothing to help the dearth of affordable housing and commercial and nonprofit space in our communities and actively harms BIPOC communities. The Abolish the New York City Tax Lien Sale Coalition urges the Racial Justice Commission to propose a formal ban on selling tax, water, or emergency repair liens to private entities, whether individuals or trusts. Better and fairer policy can follow and can be introduced by the city council, mayor, or public advocate. As long as the city can sell tax liens, there's no incentive for it to come up with a more racially just set of policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Kristen Laughter.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kristen Lauder. You can address the structural racism running rampant within the NYPD and now by changing the city charter to allow the public to vote on the Community Power Act. The NYPD cannot police itself without bias. I want to make it clear that I believe the situation is dire for this city's people of color, many of whom face police misconduct and brutality, with very few officers held accountable by the department or the appointed and powerless CCRB. For every well-known tragedy, like the killing of George Floyd, there are scores of nameless victims who never see the justice they deserve. For this reason, much more is needed in this resolution in order to truly hold police accountable. The Community Power Act creates a community elected board that finally has the power to do what is needed, to discipline and fire abusive police and to truly represent communities that have suffered far too long. The act also establishes an independent prosecutor to prosecute criminal acts by the NYPD without bias. I do not believe it is necessary for us to wait for Bill 2245 to get passed through the City Council. You can revolutionize the CCRB now and bounce the scales of power back to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I mispronounced your last name.
No worries.
Again.
No worries.
And so next we have Julie Kim. Has Julie been able to come over as, I don't see her name. Okay, looks like she's no longer here. So we will go on to Jose Guevara.
Hello. I want to thank the commissioners for granting me this opportunity to speak to powerful decision makers to change the charter to add oversight and notice, add NYCHA sales and leases to the list of actions that require the Uniform Land Use Review procedure. For the past 3 years or so, I've been attending various protests by NYCHA residents. I've documented tenants protesting against NYCHA's various plans regarding conversion. And I've placed these videos on a YouTube channel titled Mayor to Be. I wouldn't be a true YouTuber, videographer, if I didn't mention, please subscribe to my channel. It is important that as commissioners, you have a street source of what people think regarding NYCHA. This channel was created with the intent to reach powerful decision makers like yourselves that could make a huge impact on saving and also improving NYCHA. Sorry for using the word huge. That was big. Okay, but many times I ask myself, when will NYCHA's organization stop disenfranchisement of the public? In a dream, I heard God's gentle voice whispered in my left ear, now, N-O-W. I asked God, what does that mean? Then I heard the voice of Martin Luther King yelling in my right ear. NOW is an acronym which stands for NYCHA Oversight Window. I seriously think that adding to the charter, NYCHA has to improve. You're just considering the idea brings tears to my eyes because I know in my heart that it will save many people's lives and give them peace of mind. Necessary is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. By giving the community, borough president, city council, an oversight window, you're like Einstein for public housing and my personal peace of mind. And on behalf of all those that participate in my videos, I beg you to please change the charter to add oversight and notice. Add NYCHA sales and leases to the list of actions that require the Uniform Land Use Review procedure. Again, please view my YouTube channel, Mayor to Be, with a number 2 and the letter B. Okay, and subscribe. And if you see any videos that inspire you, please click like and don't forget to subscribe. And thank you for your time and consideration of this most important change to the charter.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I see that Julie Kim has now joined us. So I will turn to her and then we will open up for questions to everyone who's testified so far from the commission members. So Julie Kim.
Hi, thank you so much. Just making sure I'm lowering my hand. Okay. Hello to the commissioners. My name is Julie Kim, and I'm the co-founder of the Asian American Feminist Collective and a Queens resident from Flushing. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the collective. We would like to propose that intersectional feminist values are included as part of the values in the city charter. As Kimberly Crenshaw solidified with the theory of intersectionality, our world and our identities do not live in silos. So when intersectionality was first used to explain and show the oppression of Black women in society through both race and gender, this was really important, especially for Asian women as well, when we would go into domestic violence incidents. However, language was not considered. So it's usually, in terms of feminism, it was usually white women's experiences and needs that were at the forefront. So this is now a crucial way for us to include voices that are typically excluded when oppression is discussed in silos. In a city as diverse as New York City, where many communities would be excluded without the use of intersectionality, it is crucial to include intersectional feminism as a value to guide our city, to create policies and laws that aim to include each of us fully. Recently, in the US and in New York City, there have been calls for more police and policing as a consequence of anti-Asian violence. But intersectionality calls for all of us to take a step back and move away from these Band-Aid solutions. The Black Lives Matter uprisings that called for defunding the police and redistributing resources to social services, housing, and education are things that as intersectional feminists we can't ignore. And as Asians and Asian Americans call for these solutions, we have to take into consideration how our demands affect not just us as a community, but everyone, and not call for things that perpetuate harm. As we have recently seen with the resignation of Cuomo, we cannot continue governance as usual. We have also continued to see sexual harassment and misconduct on all levels of government, including the city, because our current governmental system as a whole still embodies misogyny, sexism, white supremacy, and classism. We need a radical shift in perspective, which this commission is trying to do. So we need to include a feminist governance that prioritizes care, life, and relationships over profit and power. Intersectional feminist politics requires us to cultivate care and develop alternatives to current systems that were built upon white supremacy and sexism. So it's important to center the voices of those who are most marginalized by society today, as that will show us and lay very bare what and how the current political systems are failing us. Thank you so much, and I hope that this value will be reflected in the city charter.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And now we will open up for questions from the commissioners, if there are any. Go ahead, Jasenia.
Hi. So, Cecile, Anthony, Julie, you all touched up on very important topics and issues, right? And this is me coming from my organizing side, right? As someone who is an activist, an organizer, and who focuses primarily on the Latino community, immigrant community. And it doesn't, like, even though I focus primarily in Latino and immigrant community, I know you all can reflect with me when you focus on your own community, right? It's since my second language is Spanish. So, Cecile, and then I will move on to Anthony and Julie. I really want to hear from you all because I really want to know how can I also communicate with my Spanish speaking community, but also the indigenous community within my own community, right? Cecile, I know you talked about the tax lien, and that really touched me because I know, like, my father, when he obtained his residency, he then became a homeowner, and it was very difficult for him to navigate the system. And I really want to hear from you, like, what are the translation documents or is there a work being done within that, like with the other communities that don't speak English? Like, I really want to know about language access. Is what you are proposing also translate it in other languages that other communities can get behind. And this is me, someone like me coming from the Latino Spanish speaking community, but I could go back to my community and say, hey, you know, Cecile has this proposal, or Cecile is also organizing around this, right? Like you could get behind of, like, I just want to know a little bit about that.
Sure. Thanks for that question. I will note that there are groups in the the Tax Lien Sale Coalition has a lot of different groups involved in it. There's a page hosted on the website of the New York City Community Land Initiative, or NICELY, which is a coalition of mostly community land trusts, and the East New York Community Land Trust, which is maybe you've heard of for doing a great deal of organizing around all of these interrelated issues, is really driving that work. I think other members of the coalition will be on here to speak today, and what some of them will have more, I think, to provide answers to your question. On a personal level, I absolutely think language access is completely critical. And is something that it often is such a barrier for people in navigating these systems. I believe that the folks at the East New York CLT and NICELY take the question of language access and translation very seriously, and I'm sure that that they would be able to provide more information on that for you.
Thank you, Cecile. And if you could please put that in the chat, because that will be very helpful, because I also work in Staten Island, specifically at Focus. I work with the Muslim Sisters of Staten Island, with the Korean Development Center as well. Like, if this is an issue that can really reflect among other communities, but the language access, it just makes it very difficult. So if you could please connect me with someone that can touch on this issue, that will be very important. So please put it in the chat. And my next question is for Anthony. Anthony, thank you so much for bringing up the NYCHA issues. I know that as an organizer, I would go into the NYCHA buildings, and I would also meet with various members of the community and people that I had not met before. And I remember I am from, my parents are from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. And I remember I met with one of the individuals that lived in one of the NYCHA buildings. She was from San Luis Potosí, Mexico, but she couldn't really she tried to tell me in English what the issues in the NYCHA building were. And then I told her, oh, it's fine, you know, I speak Spanish. And she told me specifically what the issues were. I guess my question is, I really would like to work with you, and I really would like to understand more in depth the in various languages. Can you connect me with someone that can tell me about all these issues, not just in the English language or any other language? Like, I really want to understand more in various languages that can also communicate with other people. Like, I really want to understand the issues, that so I could communicate it as well to people who speak Spanish that also want to communicate this.
I think, Yesenia, you meant to ask this question of Jose Guevara. Is that right?
Yesenia, yo soy José Guevara, pero yo no sé cómo sabiste mi nombre medio, que es Antonio. ¿Ok? Entonces, para la persona que está haciendo cosas así, quizás no lo puedes entender. Entonces, voy a hablarte en inglés, sí, para hacerlo más cómodo para las personas, o te hablo en español. ¿Cómo lo quieres, Yesenia?
Thank you, Jose. Sorry, is that I have my screen open, and it kind of it kind of was closing the various other screens. But yes, Jose, that question is directed to you. Like, how do you think I should communicate this to various other groups? Like, because NYCHA has been an issue that not just only like with the Spanish community, but also like with people who speak English or various other languages. How do you think it will be best for me to illustrate this to various other communities like that not just only speak English, but various other languages? How do you think it will be best for us to communicate these NYCHA issues?
Como en español o inglés. Okay,
In
but
English,
those,
it's fine. It's in English, it's fine. Yes.
okay. So basically, I have people coming to a little music school over here, which is right across the street from me. And we get together and they give me interviews, and it could be done in Spanish. I would love it to be done in Spanish. And also other people come at the same time to do interviews and talk about NYCHA, and just to open it up to a lot of different peoples. And I can't reach people like in different, like in Brooklyn, but at least I got that channel going. And like, say for example, even though it's my channel, right? Everybody can open up a channel, Fred, he would look at that guy. He would be everybody would hit him up, right? And there's so much talent here, so that it just because I'm doing it doesn't mean that I should be the only one doing it on YouTube. If you need any tips for setting up your YouTube channel, it's relatively easy. We could spend a little time, come and do an interview with me. I'll walk you through it. Okay. But it's such an important issue. This is such an important issue because look, for years, if you just look, we've been bamboozled for a long time. And we have to have this oversight, charter included. I'm so glad that you guys are doing this and having this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. I wanted to acknowledge that we have the co-chair of the commission, Henry Garrido, joined us during the time of the testimony. So Henry, you will be next for your questions, and then we'll have Commissioner Davey.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I've been here from the beginning. I appreciate
I'm sorry.
It's all right. I appreciate the discussion. I want to thank those who have testified today. I have two questions. First, a comment to say that we have been very consistent in saying that what we can do as a commission regarding the charter itself is amending this piece, right? Which is our 76 chapters or so on the city charter, which is the constitution of the law. We started that at the beginning, and there are some things that we can do and some things that we cannot do. And it doesn't mean that we have not and will not be addressing some of the inequities that we've talked about. We've committed to do that by, in addition to recommending what would be ballot measures, that we will be recommending policies that we deemed or may perpetuate the inequities. And one of those has to do with the New City Housing Authority, I believe, because the Housing Authority is a creation of the federal government, and it's a state entity that is governed not by the charter, but by other provisions. So I believe that we do have some limitations on that. But I wanted to ask the question, I think it was Cecile who testified about the abolish the tax lien sales. I've been looking at the charter regarding the Department of Finance and where this would fall, and the property tax status and assessment. And I've been unable to find anywhere here where this particular provision allows for it. And I wonder if you looked at the charter itself and have looked at what section this would be, because I haven't been able to find that. And secondly, if we were to recommend that as a commission, if that would be one of the recommendations, what would be the alternative, right? I've asked the question. This was a public policy decision that was made back when Giuliani started it. So if it were to be eliminated, there is still got to be a process by which those properties who are, in arrears, or however the process happens, would have to be somehow disposed of by the city. Are you suggesting not only the elimination and outlawing of the tax lien sale, but an alternative to it? That's my first question. And my second question related to, again, the legislation that was suggested regarding the police that has been introduced. I just want to make an asterisk and say that the intent of this charter commission is to address those inequities, that the recommendations going from this commission to the public will be on the ballot on November of 2022. So legislation that may be pending may actually be acted upon before that happens. I just want to go on the record on that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence.
Sure. So are there, Cecile, do you want to address the tax lien?
Sure. Again, others in the coalition that may be testifying later will probably have more to say. I'm sorry that I don't know about the exact location in the charter. This is a group testimony effort, but in terms of proposing an alternative, it would be to pursue policies that that make things easier and more affordable for renters and homeowners of color, which would include giving publicly owned land to and vacant lots that are publicly owned to community land trusts and other mission-driven developers, as opposed to giving them to speculators and real estate developers that are only seeking private profit. And another goal of the coalition for the to abolish the lien sale is to create a task force of community stakeholders to formulate alternative methods of addressing delinquent property taxes and city service fees, so that the community members can help to shape this or be the driving force to shape the alternatives. And if you take a look at the link that I dropped in the chat, there will be some more details there as well. Thank you.
This is helpful. I would suggest respectfully that the coalition may want to look at, because in looking at the city charter language itself, there's 3 or 4 different areas where this could be done. And if it is, a recommendation to abolish, it would leave sort of like a hole about what happens in between. So if the proposal is to create a community land trust model, it simultaneously, while you won't do, as you said, the proposal to do the tax lien sale, I think that would be very helpful.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Davey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have 2 questions as well. I think they're both for Christine Lauder. One of them, they both relate to the CCRB, no surprise, I guess. So one would be, in terms of an elected CCRB, has there been any thought given to what kinds of stipulations might go into charter revision that would preclude large sums of cash or money being put behind certain candidates who perhaps would not represent the progressive approach to civilian oversight of police that you all are suggesting through an elected CCRB. Particularly, you could think of many conservative groups, you could think of police unions financing their own candidates maybe much better than community groups would be able to do, and then sort of overwhelm the process. So has any thought been given to what kind of guidelines there might be around how candidates for an elected CCRB might execute their campaigns? And then my second question has to do with the legislation that you mentioned that is currently before the City Council. Can you say a little bit more about that legislation and why you think it would not be sufficient?
I'm sorry, why our legislation would not be sufficient?
You said there's a current bill before the city council, and I'm just curious what is that bill and why you think it would not be sufficient?
Okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yeah, so we have a bill that is currently before City Council. It's called the Community Power Act. It stands for Community Police Oversight with Elected Review. And we have 3 core tenets that we are wanting to abide by. We want to do an elected body, not appointed. We want them to be able to be binding in their decisions to the police commissioner rather than him being able to throw them out or water them down. And we want an independent prosecutor to oversee these investigations rather than the district attorney. And then, sorry, can you repeat the first question for me, please?
Yes, certainly. And on this question, why would that bill suffice, or would you want charter reform? So the bill you just outlined sounds like also like the charter reform you're looking for. So just curious as to what you prefer. And then the first question I asked was about financing campaigns for an elected CCRB. What could be done to ensure that very conservative money would not overwhelm those campaigns, police unions money would not overwhelm those campaigns, such that you'd end up with a CCRB that was perhaps diametrically opposed to the types of reforms that you want to see implemented?
Okay, yes, we have been addressing that. We've been, I don't have specific guidelines that have been formalized, but we know that it can happen. Money, politics and money in elections. We just know that the CCRB is not working and it's as it's designed to do. And so we just are proposing a new option, and we're still discussing, how to keep money from influencing these groups, from influencing and corrupting the board of individuals who are really looking for just, transparency and honesty throughout a police officer's investigation.
Thank you. Commissioner Yu, I believe that you've want to make some questions also, raise some questions.
I do, and my question is directed at Julie. Julie, it's so great to see you here. My question is, in this really critical time when we talk about police reform, what ideas would you like to give to us, and what suggestions do you have to, for us to consider?
Thanks, Joanne. So good to see you. First, I just want to say that I'm really excited about the values part of it. And I think when I came into it, I was really thinking about what are some of the values that I would love to see reflected in the charter. In terms of actual solutions, I think a lot of people have already talked about some really great ideas. I think something that has been really important that we've been talking about has been disaggregated data and also language access. And community resources and funding to smaller groups and organizations that might not be eligible for larger grants, but they're actually able to cater to specific groups, specific Asian American groups and Asian immigrant groups on the ground that aren't getting the resources that they can get allocated. So I would say those are a couple of things that I would recommend.
Thank you.
I have a question for, Julie, I think I want to piggyback with others what you raised in terms of some of the values, right? Since today's topic is about values. With Kristen or Cecile, Jose, what values would you attach, if you will, to the topics that you've raised today? Like, what are how do the issues that you raised today translate into values by which our city should be governed?
I can go first real quick and then pass it off. I think for me, what's really crucial is the fact of making sure that intersectionality is highlighted, because I think when we talk a lot about racial justice, there are other identities that get sidelined. And for example, I think even within Asian communities, when we think about the fact that there are Black Asians, Afro Asians, right? Like the fact that when we can't separate out just race. And so I just feel like it's so important to make sure that when we're talking about racial justice, we can't really have liberation or any type of policy that's going to fully address when we're only focused on one oppression, that all of the oppressions are related. So I think when we think about the city charter, making sure that, yes, it's about racial justice, but not forgetting that it's actually linked to all these other oppressions and making that really clear for folks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Chris.
Excuse me. I would say one of the values of our organization, our legislation, is integrity. We are just trying to restore, help with public trust with the police and get people more involved in the community and just, kind of make it an easier, if possible, coexistence. So, we're trying to, integrity is a really big part of our legislation, in that it is an independent prosecutor, and they're people that are elected, they're not appointed. So we're just trying to maintain the honesty and transparency.
Great. Cecile or Jose, do you want to go ahead, Jose?
Hi, I think one of the main qualities happens to be pride. When I was on, like, I forgot how old I was, but I was just walking around 124th Street, and some cops literally grabbed me, threw me on top of the patrol car. And that was upsetting. But when it happened again, and when it happened the third time, that gets me. Here you have NYCHA doing, selling off stuff without, any input from us. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got to say.
I appreciate it, and I'm very sorry that you had those experiences, and it's clearly very emotional. So if you need any support, please reach out, as we said before, so that you can get the support. Okay.
You guys are going to be my support. Now, NYCHA oversight window. This is a window for opportunity where we get back our pride. Please, I'm begging you.
Thank you. We take that responsibility very seriously. So I want to give an opportunity to Cecile, and then I see that Commissioner Mata has her hand up also.
I'll try to be brief. Just public land for public use, I would say, is the crucial value, and that's both currently owned city-owned public land that's not being used, being transferred to some sort of community ownership, and generally creating more opportunities for community ownership and community control of land. That's I would say would be a core value.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Mata.
Thank you. Julie, I want to hear a little bit more from you. You did touch on an issue that, I usually have to separate myself as a commissioner and then as an organizer, right? But it's very difficult to do that when as my role is to ensure that I continue working with the community. And as someone that works directly with the Latino community, with immigrant women, I have been seeing how, and I work primarily with domestic workers. And once I sit down with them and I start speaking with them about their issues and whatnot, domestic violence comes about, right? And a lot of the times they tell me, I can't communicate exactly what I want to say. And this is only like in this aspect of someone who's speak Spanish, right? But then I come across with those individuals that speak indigenous language, and then they speak in the indigenous language and then translate it into Spanish, and then they tell me. I guess from my point of view, I'm trying to figure out, I'm sure how do you think it's best for us to really ensure that we capture what is happening in the essence of each community, right? Especially I'm working with various other communities, like for example, like with the Bangladeshi community, with the Korean community, and it's step by step. But once I'm reaching to each community, I'm realizing that each community has its own language or various traditions, right? I guess I'm trying to figure out, what do you think is the best way for us to communicate with each other? Because we all come from different backgrounds, different traditions, and different language. And I just really want to hear that, because even outside the commission, right, as an organizer, it's very difficult to do that. And I really want to make sure that as a commission, we can really communicate with all communities. So I really want to hear it from you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I think that's really hard. But I think one of the things that come to mind is kind of who gets to speak. And I'm really grateful for this. You know, I actually only knew about it because of some of my friends and like people sharing it with me, but also who kind of gets to speak on behalf of the community. And the Asian community and Asian American community is so huge. And I think for us, and especially with my work doing outreach, I think trying to pull in different voices that are untraditionally heard and in a way that's comfortable for them. So for example, I remember a couple of years ago, like the Interfaith Council, I think the mayor's office had an Interfaith Council, and I realized there was not a single Korean faith leader that was included in these meetings. And I tried to see if there was a way, or what's the criteria of getting a faith leader from our community reflected. But, you know, I didn't really know the way, and I don't know if that's changed, but that was like one crucial part of it that I thought, because especially in the Korean immigrant community, but also other Asian immigrant communities, religious institutions are a little bit removed, I feel. And at the same time, they're actually reaching so many people. And I'm wondering if it's possible to make sure that when we have religious, you know, faith councils, or when we have religious leaders come together, can we make sure that we're including our Asian immigrant churches and our Asian immigrant faith institutions as part of those conversations when those people are seeing them every week? And the other thing on the domestic violence piece, there was something that happened in Flushing where there was actually like a homeless shelter. This is a little bit removed, but there was a homeless shelter in Flushing that was trying to get shut down. I believe the city agency was trying to shut it down because it wasn't registered in the right way. Like it was kind of like an ad hoc, very Korean-centered immigrant communities getting together and making sure that homeless people in the community are gonna just be able to go there and be able to be a part of that instead of going through the shelter system. And when I found out that that shelter was trying to get closed down by the city agency, I was appalled, because here's an institution that, like a community center that might not have been official, might not have had some of these certifications or whatever it is that they needed, yet they're actually providing a service and they were trying to get shut down, right? Like, I just feel like we need to see what are the solutions that are already happening in the community, because believe me, there's a lot of mutual aid going on that's not registered. There's a lot of community efforts that are not going to be certified. They're just going to pop up. And can we speak to those communities and make sure that there's different models of shelters? There's different models of domestic violence shelters. I think we just can't just stick to, okay, this is the one model and it's going to work for everyone. We have to tailor it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Julie and Jose. I really want to emphasize that I really acknowledge what you both said. I am really I really took everything that you both said, and I'm trying my best to ensure that I could really bring it back as well, like trying to not just connect with my Spanish speaking community, but as well with all communities. So please understand if I was asking too many questions, it was to ensure that I can not just communicate with my Spanish speaking community, but with all communities, because one of the things that I'm realizing as an organizer is an issue that affects I'm Mexican American, right? But what affects my Mexican community is also affecting various other communities as well. So please excuse if I'm asking all these questions. It's more to understand how can we better communicate with all communities.
I see, Madam Chair, that you have your hand up also.
I am listening to Julie, listening to everyone, appreciating what everyone has said. There's just some things that I'm centering on. I want to make sure that I'm on the right path. So, Jose, as I listened to you and appreciated both your story, your journey, your pain, which is, most unfortunate, and we need to try to work and control against that as we move forward. As I listen to you, I just want to make sure that I'm on point. You talked about night shift, but what I also heard was just, that we as a city need to respect each and every one of us, regardless of our zip code, where we live or where we reside. And that what we have had happen in this city, and I'll go farther and say in this nation, is, we act as though respect is based on income and assets. And we need to lean into that. So just want and do some work there. I listened to you, Julie, and I heard you speak about intersectionality, but in this last exchange with Yesenia, I heard you also speak about individuality and the importance of us seeing each other, as belonging, but also as individuals. And so I want to bring that forward because I want to make sure that that's what you both intend, because I'm centering on that as I think about the work that must be done. Is that fair?
I can speak to that really quickly. Definitely, yeah, individuality. I think I'm not really talking about identities, but really the oppression. So yeah. So yeah, everyone has their own individual experience, but I'm talking more about the systematic oppression.
Right, but what I'm saying to you is that even in that systematic oppression, I'm giving this back to you because I want to really make sure I understand it. Even within systematic oppression, what happens is the individual gets lost, just who people are. And there's a grouping and an association, and I'm trying to figure out if and how we need to speak to it and address that as well. That's what I'm really saying back to you, but maybe it's not what you intend. And that's fair. That's what I'm hearing, or that's what I'm now channeling into. Jose?
Well, thank you very much for seeking a clarification, Jennifer. I would like to be asked, hey, do you want to be thrown over the police car? You might be a cantor of a church, but do you want to be? At least if they did that, they would be asking me. With NYCHA just having no oversight, they're basically saying, doing what the police officer did, was not asking me a question, not investigating or just going on assumption. And they're going on and speculation is not a good thing. They're speculating that they want that these conversions would be beneficial to the residents. And I desperately need the city council community to be involved in these conversions for the sake of all the residents. We do not want to see these residents kicked out into the street. How can we have to help. Please, I'm begging you guys, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are now going to move on to our second group of folks who have signed up to testify. Again, my apologies if I don't pronounce your last names correctly, or your first names. We have Shana Sabio, Eugene Falik, Brian Oster, and William Scarborough. And again, I will remind everybody that we have, you will have 3 minutes to present your remarks, and then we will open it up for the commissioners to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Shana Sabio, and I'm here on behalf of the Flatbush African Burial Ground Coalition, which is a coalition of 50 engaged Brooklyn artists, organizers, residents, and organizations. The values that we are suggested be added to the charter are self-determination, historic preservation, restoration, pride, and inclusion with regards to African burial grounds as they're discovered in New York City. We're recommending to amend the New York City Charter to provide culturally sensitive guidelines for the clear and respectful preservation of African burial grounds. Legacy is a word that has been used much in recent times, and unfortunately for people of African descent, our legacies have been consistently erased due to neglect and disinvestment. We have the opportunity to right these wrongs and prevent the further erasure of the important contributions of people of African descent to the founding of our nation and its infrastructure. It's an established fact that in the early 18th century, New York had the highest concentration of enslaved Africans north of the Mason-Dixon line. They worked in the fields and in the homes of the European settlers of Kings and Queens counties, the two largest producers of agricultural products at the time. The fruits of their labor fed the growing financial capital across the river and the growing nation. They built roads, churches, schools, and important infrastructure. Dotted all across our city and state are the ancestral remains of people of African descent, and we anticipate that as development continues, more burial sites will be found. These sacred sites are pieces of world history that show how indigenous land, combined with African expertise and skill, were used to build the wealth of individuals and nations. When that history is erased, we deny the youth of our country, especially and most importantly, youth of African and indigenous descent, the pride and purpose of knowing the important contributions their ancestors made to our world. It has been shown that knowledge of cultural history improves outcomes for youth of African descent. They have a positive sense of identity and are likely to build stronger, healthier relationships with their peers and intergenerationally, and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. Having a positive racial identity also protects against the negative effects of racial discrimination, which unfortunately still is present in our society. As members of this coalition, and myself as a member of the African descendant community, we recommend that a new section be added to the city charter containing specific culturally sensitive rules and procedures for the city government's formal response whenever an African burial ground is known to exist at a specific or proximate site, or when evidence of a burial ground is discovered. The protocol must include the cessation of development plans and preservation of the space by transfer to community land trusts, where community residents will take care of the land, ensuring it remains public for future generations. It must also include the meaningful engagement with the descendant community, which has been identified by leading scholars as anyone of African descent. If such rules existed today, the Flatbush African Burial Ground Coalition would not be struggling to protect the site, the sacred land at 2286 Church Avenue in Brooklyn from further desecration by developers. If such rules existed when the burial ground was discovered in Brownsville, the youth of that community might have more than a small plaque to honor their ancestors. The repeated dehumanization of Black life is no secret. The struggle for a dignified life, death, and burial is central to equity and justice for all human beings. On the eve of the 30th anniversary of the African burial ground discovery in Manhattan, New York is being presented with a unique and historic opportunity to create a legacy of innovation in equity-centered design and anti-racist policy. Nationwide, finally, other jurisdictions are writing laws such as that is being recommended for the New York City Charter now. Let New York lead the way and cement our city's legacy of innovation. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you very much for your words and for your recommendation. Next, we have Eugene. Is it, how do you pronounce your last name?
Phallic.
Phallic.
Hi, I'm a member of the board of the Bayswater Civic Association and Queens Rail Corporation, but I'm speaking for myself. In my view, there are two problems with the city charter. Number one, there is no way to bring a government official to heel when they out and out publicly say that they're going to break the law. And most recently, the Commissioner of Transportation, former commissioner, told me she doesn't care about the law as long as she gets the results that she wants. So I think we need a method where a citizen, or I shouldn't say a citizen, anyone can take a government official, produce evidence in court, and get a court order for them to comply with the law. Article 78, which is the state law that seems to cover this, is really impossible for the average citizen to make use of. So I think we need a provision in the city charter, number one. Number two, I've worked at a couple of large oil companies, and they are structured very differently. Individual purchasers of corporate services decide whether or not to pay the corporate budget. So if we transfer that model to the city, a certain percentage, say, of the police budget or sanitation budget would require the approval of the local community boards. If the community board was not happy with the way the service was being provided, they would not approve the budget. And that would bring the agencies, or would make the agencies, number one, more responsive to the community. And number two, it would give the community boards a certain amount of power, which in reality today, they don't have. I live in Far Rockaway, and our area has been raped by the City Planning Commission. They've created a 50% increase in the population. They've created impossible traffic situations. And there's nothing the community board could do. So I think that if these agencies had to get at least a portion of their budget approved by the community board, that would do wonders to how they behave. Now, let's suppose that the sanitation budget was not signed off on by the community board. Obviously, the sanitation department is not going to fire people. But if the mayor had to provide it out of his funds to make up the difference, then I think it would have a dramatic effect on overall city operations. So those are my two suggestions. Number one, make an arrangement so that a member of the public can go into court and get an order requiring a commissioner to obey the law. And I can give you lots of examples where commissioners are not obeying the law today. So we need that, and we need to empower the community boards by making city agencies responsible to them and not the mayor particularly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Brian Oster.
One second. Actually, is it possible to have Brother Bill Scarborough go first? I'm just trying to get myself situated here. Would that be okay?
I'm sorry, say that again, Brian?
Would it be okay if Bill Scarborough went before me and I go after him? I'm just trying to put get myself together here.
No problem. Okay, we'll turn to William Scarborough then.
Okay, hello and good afternoon. Thank you for making this opportunity to speak to the panel on the Commission on Racial Justice. My name is William Scarborough, president of the St. Albans Congregational Church Justice Witness Ministry, and previously a state assemblyman in the 29th Assembly District. I would like to talk about issues of environmental injustice. And I know there's a commission on environmental injustice, but it certainly segues with this. I'd like to propose that in the city charter, there be a mapping of certain negative environmental institutions, so on, and that there facilities can be put in because it is clear across the city that facilities and institutions have a negative impact on life, negative impact on real estate values, just an impact on people's health in certain communities. And somehow that playing field has to be leveled. I speak of, in one particular area, my community of Jamaica, along Liberty Avenue, just between Merrick Boulevard and 177th Street. On one side of the street, you have residences that, you know, have paid good prices for their homes and want to have a good quality of life. And across, you have a concrete masonry facility. You have 4 waste transfer stations. You have a slaughterhouse, you have junkyards, and all of these facilities have a negative impact on the quality of life. And it's an environmental injustice and it's a racial injustice. The area where these facilities are located is designated M1 zoning, which means that anything in that facility should exist peacefully, has rivers. But you have the most facilities in zoning law that exist there. What's called Use Group 18, which are the most noxious and most intrusive facilities in zoning. And they're allowed to exist in these communities because supposedly they will meet performance standards, which are never enforced by the agencies. And so what you have is a really intrusive and unhealthful quality of life for these communities. Somehow this playing field has to be leveled. And I think that there should be something in the city charter that says, number one, there should be a mapping of noxious and socially disruptive uses. And there should not be more than a certain number in any community. That should be hard and fast, and they should be spread around. And secondly, facilities that are noxious and in the most intrusive use groups, use group 17, use group 18, that are really serious problems to quality of life, should never be put next to residences under any circumstances, because the supposed performance standards that are to govern them never take place. And we're talking about hazards to people's life, not only their quality of life, but their health. So these are some things that I would like to put before this commission. And I hope that you give them serious consideration and put them in your findings. You know, I'd also like to know how, as a community, my ministry at church is interested in participating as a group in this charter, in this commission, and also getting feedback on your findings. So I came in late. I don't know if you've given that information previously, but if you can put forward a way that we can get information and feedback and participation in the future, it would be greatly appreciated. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Brian Oster. You ready, Brian?
Yes, I am. Thank you for your patience. So my name is Oster Brian. I serve as president of St. Albans Civic Improvement Association. We're speaking to criminal justice, and we understand, I don't think it's well documented that it impacts the Black community more severely than it has other communities, disproportionately speaking. But in 2017, the DA's office under the leadership of Richard Brown, donated $20 million to the NYPD. At the time, it didn't get a whole lot of news attention, but I thought this, from the position that the Queens DA would have to, at some point, sometimes prosecute officers, it showed shows of severe lack of impartiality on the part of the DA. I understand that the DA's office does not fall under the purview of the charter, but I do know that NYPD does. And so I'm not sure if how the commission could restrict that kind of funding, because I never read that NYPD was lacking for cash. And I always thought that was rather disturbing, considering at a point in time that things have changed a bit, but I think it would behoove us to ensure that it never happens again. That some of the reforms that were happening in other boroughs weren't happening in Queens. I don't think that's a coincidence. So I was hoping that the Racial Justice Commission could look into issues like that and prevent them from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies for having your name backwards. So,
It's okay.
All right, so now we will open up for questions from the commissioners. You can certainly jump in. You don't have to raise your hand, but Madam Chair.
Oh, I don't have a question in this moment, but I did want to respond to former Assembly Member Scarborough's question about faith engagement. We very much appreciate that on matters concerning, oppression as they play out in various forms. It is often the faith community that is a resource for people who suffered harms, race-related harms, oppression related harms. And so I have been having a conversation with members of the Racial Justice Commission staff about engaging with the faith leadership community to hear from faith community members about their experiences and their thoughts and ideas. So we will be in touch with you. That's all I've got.
Okay. Any other? Commissioners?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that if we're not asking questions, it does not mean that we're not interested. We've just absorbed what you said, and we will be taking it into consideration.
Oh, I did want to ask Mr. Scarborough, in other panels, it has been suggested that this commission should recommend or, formulate a charter revision that basically would require, just like there's environmental impact studies, to have, racial justice impact studies, in certain decision-making in government. Is that something that similar to what you're proposing? Or what are the differences from what you're proposing about the mapping pieces, of the entities that you were concerned about?
I hope you can hear me. The last two were kind of breaking up. Maybe it's my connection, but I hope you can hear me. Generally, I guess at the bottom, at the minimum, I would like to see something in the charter that prohibits the establishment of certain types of businesses close to residents. The city zoning designates certain really noxious types of facilities. They usually use group 17 and use group 8 being next to residences because the cell is that certainly the borough presidents and others
We're having trouble hearing you.
have a negative. Can you hear me?
We're having
Hello?
trouble hearing you. So yes, so I'm wondering whether if you turn off your video, the audio may come through better. Your video is frozen. It's frozen right now.
Hello?
Now we can hear you. Kind of.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Connection, if you were able to hear. But in a nutshell, I would like to see it in a charter or otherwise codified that certain noxious and you can categorize them in zoning as use group 17 and use group 18, never be allowed to be placed close to residences. Their side effects are too noxious and too dangerous to health to even be allowed, even with the so-called performance standards, which are then never enforced. I think there has to be some kind of hard codification to stop that. And the other thing, most borough presidents and city agencies, they have a listing of what's the type of facilities that are adverse in certain communities. And it's commonly known that too many of them together will bring down the quality of life in the community. There has to be something that says that there's a mapping that says that only a certain number, there's a moratorium or there's just a hard stop. Because otherwise, those communities that have strength and are able to use the system do not get them, and they're all dumped in certain communities. And it is a racial justice issue.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, we have one more person who signed up to testify, and I wanted to, though, raise again that if you have not signed up to testify, but would like to say a few words, or don't think of testifying as this very formal thing, please let us know, and we will certainly accommodate you. So the next person is, if I can scroll correctly here, Alvidia Maimon or Mamon? Okay, looks like she's no longer with us. Okay, so if there is anybody else who is attending tonight, who would like to provide some remarks, let us know, and then this will be then the last call. Okay, we have Magali Polo.
Hi, thank you for making this space possible, and thank you for everyone who have shared. I find that doing this work, no matter how much we talk about the need for self-care, that the feelings that it brings up, it always leaves, at least for me, it always leaves me with this deep sadness. And I'm wondering, even in this forum itself, how others are feeling. Do I need to do something to send the
Are you
to send it back to you?
No, no. I was just wondering. No, I just was wondering whether you wanted to continue speaking or you were raising this as a general question.
Yes, it's a general question because it brings about so much deep sadness for me, and we talk a lot about the need for self-care, but in a forum like that, before we leave this space together, it would be good to be able to be at a place where it doesn't leave at least myself so saddened. And I'm wondering if others feel the same way.
Golly, if I may, I thank you for sharing how you're feeling, and I actually thank you for inviting all of us to to kind of be in this space with you and to be vulnerable. And what I'll share with you is that I've been in many conversations of late of this type, serving on the commission, and I hear what you're saying, and I can relate because it is sad. It does make one sad to hear about the injustices, some that we have personally lived and experienced, and then some that others have lived and experienced, and to know that these injustices are not just, how do I best say this? They're not happenstance or they're not one-offs, but that we're trying to deal with what are systemic problems that, that affect so many of us and in very harmful ways. It's saddening and it's painful, and I'm glad and I'm thankful that you're saying let's lean in and just for a moment center on that. It's not kind of matter of fact. We have to center in on how we feel about these issues. What I will tell you, Magali, is that what I try to center on personally is that so many of you are coming forward. Persons like you are coming forward and sharing your experiences, sharing your thoughts, sharing how you feel. And so for me, sometimes the sadness turns into hope. That if we lean in and we listen to one another and we recognize, acknowledge, embrace our individual and our shared experiences, and then we try to individually and collectively do something about it, then we can get to a better place. So what I'm just sharing with you is kind of how I center for myself, especially when these conversations are they're hard. They're very difficult and they're hard. hard to hear, and some of them we experienced them personally. So thank you. Just sharing kind of how I get there.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to echo that as well, Magali. Thank you for raising that. I think these are very, as Jennifer said, deeply felt issues, and I think, I'm speaking for myself, although I know many of the commission members share this also, that part of why we're here is because we do want to turn this into hope and do some things that are meaningful and not window dressing, that can have a positive impact on our communities, our BIPOC communities. I also wanted to share with you and others that because of this, we always have emotional support staff as part of these meetings. And Myla is the person who's on today for this particular conversation. If you want to reach out to her, feel free to put on the chat, that you'd like to connect with her. And again, thanking you for your words and your courage to say what you've said. I want to also now turn it to Ajoa Gazifa. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, for your remarks, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ajoa Gifa, and I live in St. Albans, Queens. I'm also a member of the St. Albans Congregational Church, member of the Justice and Witness Ministry, along with Bill Scarborough, who just testified a minute ago. I want to talk about the issue of homeless shelters being located within community boards throughout the city. Community Board 12, the community board in which I live, bears the brunt of having the most shelters, more shelters than any other community board in Queens. We have more shelters than anyone. And I think it's unfair that we are burdened with having all these shelters in our community, while other communities get away with not having any at all. So it's unfair, and I think that there needs to be something codified to say that there has to be some way that we can share the burden of these shelters evenly across the board, because to have one community inundated with so many shelters devalues our home, devalues our quality of life, overloads our school systems, is economically unaffordable for people to do the things they need to do in their communities, because there's so many homeless shelters located within one community board. And that has been an issue forever in our community. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the ranked choice voting and how that came about. I am a community activist, and I've been out here doing all kinds of work. I worked on the census. I'm around now working with trying to see what's going to happen with the redistricting and various other things. However, I looked at the ranked choice voting, and for me, I find it not to be the thing that needed to be for us in the city. And the reason is this. One, it was thrown at us. We didn't know it was coming. No one started talking to us in our community about ranked choice voting until 1 month before an election was taking place. So our community residents were not educated to ranked choice voting. It was thrown on the ballot. People were told to vote for it. And some people voted for it because they were told to vote for it, because they don't do their homework sometimes. If you look at how it turned out, ranked choice voting costs taxpayers a lot of money, because if each and every person, we had 15 people run for city council district in my district, 15 people. If each of those people were eligible for funding, the 8-to-1, then our tax dollars were paying for that. Normally, you wouldn't have that many people running. People would normally drop out at a certain point in time because they couldn't afford to keep up. But because we are giving them the money to stay on the ballot, and they're going to lose anyway because only one person could win, then we are losing money, and we're actually funding a losing battle. And I just think ranked choice voting that way did not work for me. So that's just my opinion. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your remarks as well. I will now turn it over to our commissioners to see if they have any questions.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but what I do appreciate, I appreciate the points that you made about ranked choice voting, and for two reasons. One is that one of the things that I remember well when ranked choice voting was actually being put forward as a ballot proposal, very similar to what our commission will be doing, putting forth ballot proposals to the voting public. One of the things that was said was that it would benefit communities of color. And one of the things that I'm hearing now is that, and I'm, from various vantage points and people, is this question about, does it benefit communities of color? The reason I'm raising this is because I think your centering on ranked choice voting helps me to think about, should help us all as commission members to think about what we're doing here and what is the communication with community and especially communities of color about the actions that we're proposing and taking to make sure that we all are fully informed, as best informed as we possibly can be about what is putting forward. It just seems like what I hear in the aftermath of ranked choice voting is that there was a lot of confusion, not just on the day of voting or the month leading up to the voting, but even in the proposal being put on the ballot itself. And so I'm not necessarily speaking directly to ranked choice voting, but what your issue raises as a point of interest and concern for me. And so I just want to thank you for that.
I do have a question about for you about homeless shelters, the concentration of homeless shelters in your district. Do you have a suggestion, I guess, or an alternate, like a way in which you would suggest things to get done so that it doesn't overburden usually communities of color? But do you have a suggested process?
I don't have a suggested process. However, I think that the powers that be who makes the decisions as to where these shelters should be located should come up with a process that's fair. When you tell me that you're putting 10 shelters in one community board and no shelters in another community board, that's unfair. When community board 12 stands up and fight, and they're predominantly people of color, we have a rainbow coalition of people who live in that district. But when you go over to the other side of town, say Forest Hills, and when you have a bunch of, Anglo-Saxons, then they can fight and say, oh, well, we don't want this. Or in Bayside, we don't want it. And they stand up and they fight and they don't get it. So there has to be a fairer process by which these decisions are made.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other commissioners? Oh. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Everybody's testimony is critical for this process. It is on public record. We have taken notes of all of this, and this will help to shape our recommendations. If anyone was not able to testify today, you're always welcome to, I think there's one more forum, is that correct? Where there could be testimony provided, or please feel free to send us written remarks as well. So please stay tuned. If you want to submit it, your testimony or remarks in writing, you can visit our website, or again, you can go to bit.ly/NYC-4-racial justice, all one word. And our website is nyc.gov/racial justice. It's right there if you can look, if you can see the shared screen. Our next public input.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, Mrs. Branch. How are you?
Can we, yeah. Okay, sorry. So our next public input session will be in person on September 9th at 5 p.m. So please save the date, spread the word. And you can register, folks can register at bit.ly/racial justice, all one word, -input session, all one word. We want to encourage everybody to follow us on social media. The information is on your screen, but those of you who cannot see our screen, we are at Racial Justice NYC on Instagram and Facebook, and at Racial Justice NY on Twitter. Have a good night, everybody. It was a pleasure to have you.